The phrase amateur can be considered a dirty word if spoken about in professional circles. It can be considered disparaging. However, being an amateur is something that we should all aim for. Because in the words of Charlie Chaplin, that's all any of us are. We are amateurs. We don't live long enough to become anything else. So, despite being the most famous of the silent film actors, even Charlie Chaplin considered himself to be an amateur, perhaps in his own field. But why would he say that if he was being paid for what he was doing? Well, it's quite simple. You can still have that amateur spirit even when you are a professional in your field, because you can always be experimenting. You can always be trying out new things, learning from people who do something similar to yourself, learning new techniques, or even going into a new field where you know little to nothing about it. For example, I am a visual artist who has a day job, but I am learning as I go on YouTube. So therefore, I am an amateur video maker. So with that being said, it can be quite freeing to actually be an amateur, because you're not necessarily being held to the same standard. You are still learning the rules of a skill, but you don't know them well enough to then eventually break those rules. There can be this awkward middle bit where you feel quite comfortable doing it, but then you always want to be experimenting, learning new things, learning from other people. So you don't go stale. I think it can be quite easy when you are a professional in your creative field where you become afraid of trying new things because you've been doing it the same way for years and years and years. You can be maybe quite isolated and you don't reach out, expand your horizons, get inspired by others, and therefore it can become a bit stagnant. But the journey that an amateur takes can be quite an interesting one, because you're not quite sure exactly where you're going. Some people find that scary, and that's understandable, especially if you've not developed many other skills. It doesn't even have to be creative, like considered the typical creative type skills like painting or playing a musical instrument or acting. It could be something like cooking or public speaking. So it casts this wide net of skills that you could learn, and I think that most people could learn at least more than one skill well. But it's keeping that curiosity and being open to new experiences, new inputs, even criticisms from other people who are in your field or in the field that you're trying to break into, where you can actually learn quite a lot. And that's the thing about an amateur. An amateur is always learning. They're always trying to get feedback, and it can be frustrating because you don't know it. You don't know as much as you would like. But you only learn whilst you're doing. Another thing about amateurs is that everybody starts as one. It doesn't matter if you are a footballer who earns millions of pounds a year, or a famous movie actor, they all had to start from somewhere. And the great thing about being an amateur is that anyone that you admire in a creative field or a sports field, or maybe in an intellectual field, they all started off not really understanding what it was they were doing. They had to be taught, they had to gain feedback from others, they had to experiment. And with all of that comes the confidence where you appear to be professional even when you're not. And there are people who have years and years of experience in their field and don't make a penny from it. And that is entirely their choice. There really isn't that much difference between being an amateur and being a professional. One simply earns money once you're a professional, but you can still have that amateur spirit where you are experimenting, you are learning, you are putting yourself forward for feedback and even criticism. And especially if you are doing something like myself, where you are being creative but also putting it out to the public as I go, then you're sort of wearing your heart on your sleeve. It's quite a brave thing to do if anyone is considering doing a YouTube channel. And I've learned a lot from it so far. In the words of Shinryu Suzuki, in the novice's minds, there are many possibilities. In the expert's mind, there are few. So I think the takeaway is that we should always be open to new experiences, trying new things, even when we find them a bit scary to start off with. Anyone that you've admired for a specific skill, be it acting, be it football, be it cooking, be it public speaking, those things take time to actually refine. And it could be weeks, months, years before you see how far you've come in that skill and that you get noticed for that skill. Because once you get good at a skill, you will be considered talented by those who don't engage in that specific skill. Just something to think about. So let me know in the comments, what skill are you currently learning? Are you an amateur or are you a professional? Is there anything you would like to try? Let me know, and your comments might be inspiration for a future video. So thank you for watching.